The conflict in the Middle East is rapidly escalating this Tuesday night, raising pressing questions about the impact on the people of Iran. Mixed messages surround the U.S. president's rationale for launching these attacks. We were engaged in negotiations with these radicals, he stated, but in my view, they were poised to strike first. Additionally, the president has criticized some European allies, calling out the UK for being very, very uncooperative. Beyond the battlefield, concerns grow over how this war could influence your finances, affecting more than just oil and gas prices. Experts are now offering advice to everyday investors navigating this volatile environment. The Trump administration asserts that the conflict the U.S. and Israel initiated against Iran will only intensify. Despite claims of eliminating much of Iran's leadership, Iran continues to retaliate fiercely, launching missiles and drones at neighbors across the Persian Gulf, including striking the U.S. consulate in Dubai. Within Iran itself, hundreds of sites have been targeted. Iran's Red Crescent reports that 787 casualties have occurred, among them key leaders who convened today to select Iran's next supreme leader. The White House has clarified that regime change is not a stated objective of this conflict. Yet the assault is effectively eliminating potential successors to the current regime. Most of the figures we had in mind are dead, the president explained. We had some individuals from that group who have now perished, and another group may have been taken out based on recent reports. It seems a third wave is coming soon. Pretty soon, there will be no one left to know. President Trump also refuted claims made by his Secretary of State, suggesting that Israel pressured the U.S. to initiate the strikes. The president emphasized that the decision was his own, taken to maximize the chance of success. The president acted on the timing that gave us the highest chance of success. Meanwhile, on the war's second day, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly expressed that the U.S. is assisting him in realizing a long-held ambition. This powerful alliance allows us to do what I have long hoped for over the past 40 years, Netanyahu said, declaring the intent to decisively strike what he called the terror regime. Our thorough coverage of this expanding conflict begins with Jeff's simple reporting live from Istanbul, cautioning that some images from the front lines are particularly distressing. The Middle East war is intensifying and spreading rapidly, as evidenced by a new front in Lebanon. After Hezbollah fired rockets into Israel on Monday, Israel responded by striking the command centers of Lebanese militant groups in Beirut. Additionally, Israel deployed its ground forces into Lebanon, adopting a defensive posture. This move effectively shattered the fragile ceasefire established in 2024. At the same time, parts of Thrawn now bear a stark resemblance to Gaza City, reduced to rubble following relentless airstrikes from Israel and the U.S. Thrawn's Navy and Air Force have been decimated, its infrastructure heavily destroyed. Despite President Trump's claims of disarming Thrawn, the regime is escalating its offensives. It has launched strikes not only against Israel, but has also targeted 9 other countries in the region. American bases, embassies, oil refineries, and energy infrastructure have all come under attack, further widening the scope of this volatile and dangerous conflict. Saudi Arabia has issued a stern warning threatening to respond forcefully, while Yemen has made heartfelt appeals to President Trump, urging him to de-escalate the mounting tensions. The conflict is expanding far beyond Israel's borders now, leading to severe punishments and deepening divisions among the United States allies throughout the region. An international security expert reflects on this escalating crisis and underscores the importance of historical perspective for the Trump administration. For over a century, efforts to overthrow regimes through air power alone have consistently failed. Initially, Trump publicly spoke about regime change, but has since abandoned that rhetoric. He seemed to downplay the possibility of forging an alliance with Iran's pro-democracy leader, Raza Pahlavi, commenting that although some people support him, the administration has not seriously considered that approach. It appears that fostering change from within Iran might be a more fitting strategy. Trump's hopes for a swift Venezuela-style operation to impose his will on Iran have not come to fruition, and likely never will. So, what does all of this turmoil mean for ordinary Iranians? Are they already the greatest victims in this unfolding saga? Organizations report that the civilian death toll in Iran has soared into the hundreds. Iranian state television has broadcast vivid images purportedly showing the aftermath of an attack on a girls' school, which they claim resulted in the deaths of over 150 children and staff members. While global news cannot independently verify these claims, the profound grief and suffering are undeniable. Meanwhile, Israel has stated it was unaware of any strike in that vicinity. Late today, the White House released a statement attempting once again to clarify the goals of Operation Epic Fury, a mission focused on dismantling the Iranian regime, crippling its military capabilities, and halting its nuclear program. On another front, 4 out of the 6 U.S. service members killed in the war have now been identified. All are reservists from Iowa, with the youngest only 20 years old. Notably, the Trump administration has not sought congressional approval to conduct this war. As Jackson Prosco reports, lawmakers are raising tough questions about this decision. President Trump recently insisted that the strikes were justified by the imminent threat that Iran would develop a powerful nuclear weapon within a month. Claims that contradict assessments by international experts, and even the United States Secretary of State, who suggested that the real danger was that Israel might strike Iran first. According to the Secretary, they anticipated Israeli action, which could provoke retaliation against American forces. Trump may have accelerated Israel's hand, but both nations were prepared. The ramifications of President Trump's decisions are now reverberating across the Middle East. Iranian drones targeted the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh overnight, and the U.S. consulate in Dubai was similarly attacked. In response, the United States has closed its embassies in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Lebanon, ordered non-essential personnel to evacuate 6 countries, and urged all American citizens to leave 14 nations in the region immediately. Most commercial flights have been canceled, with the U.S. arranging charter flights for departures. The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem has issued a warning, emphasizing the heightened risks and advising caution in these volatile times. The situation remains dire for Americans stranded abroad, particularly in places like Dubai, where evacuation or direct assistance is simply beyond the capabilities currently available. One such individual caught in this predicament is retired Major General Randy Manner, who formerly served as Deputy Commanding General for the U.S. Army in the Middle East. Now, he finds himself caught in the crossfire of a fresh conflict led by the United States. From his perspective as a senior military officer, the purpose of this war is baffling. Manner shares the widespread confusion felt by many Americans about the constantly shifting explanations for the conflict's objectives. Initially, the aims seem to include stopping drone manufacturing and reducing the stockpile of Iranian weapons. Then, talk surfaced about regime change. Manner questions, where did all this come from? Such ambiguity feels unusual from a military standpoint, where clarity about goals and success criteria are typically fundamental. Meanwhile, back in Washington, lawmakers were briefed on the administration's rationale and apparent objectives. Yet these explanations failed to resolve the critical uncertainties harbored by many. The general sentiment among the American people is clear. They do not want another endless war. Meanwhile, the administration appears uncertain itself, with the reasoning behind the military action shifting by the hour. President Trump had campaigned on ending wars, not starting new ones, and this sudden pivot has led to growing unease. Public reaction reflects this confusion and dissatisfaction. Within just a few days, 6 out of 10 Americans disapprove of the military action. Only 27% believe the United States made sufficient diplomatic efforts before resorting to force. The skepticism spans party lines, with a vast majority of Democrats and independents doubting that President Trump has a coherent strategy. This skepticism is now causing ripples within Trump's own political faction. Prominent figures align with the MAGA movement, including media personality Tucker Carlson and former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, have voiced objections to the war, openly questioning how it serves American interests. In Canada, the response to these developments is evolving as well. The Canadian Prime Minister, currently on a trade mission in Australia, broke his silence after several days, offering more detailed commentary on the Middle East conflict. Mackenzie Gray, traveling with the Prime Minister, reports that Mark Carney's stance on Iranian military action has noticeably shifted. Initially, Carney strongly supported the bombing, but now he is adopting a more nuanced approach. Canada was not consulted or invited to participate in the military operation. Officials were neither informed beforehand nor included in decision-making. Prime Minister Carney pointed out that these actions appear to contradict international law, a significant first from a Canadian government official, suggesting that what the U.S. and Israel have done could be illegal. Despite these legal concerns, Carney remained supportive of the broader actions, citing Iran's nuclear ambitions and the regime's record of murdering both its own citizens and Canadians abroad as justification. Unlike Canada's defense minister, Carney stopped short of calling for an immediate ceasefire, indicating a more restrained but cautiously supportive position. In summary, across multiple fronts, from stranded Americans and skeptical lawmakers in Washington to cautious Canadian leadership, the uncertainty and doubts surrounding the conflict are palpable. The call for clarity, legality, and a coherent strategy continues to grow louder amid these troubling developments. The United States and Israel must strictly adhere to international law, while Iran is urged to cease its attacks on civilian infrastructure across other Middle Eastern countries. Canada approaches this turbulent global landscape not with passive hope for an ideal world, but by confronting reality head-on, even as it deeply regrets that the current conflict underscores the repeated failures of the international order. This statement came during Mark Carney's first press conference since leaving Ottawa just a week ago, and after his recent meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Carney made it clear he did not support a senior government official's earlier comments before the trip, which claimed that the Indian government had not continued any involvement in extortion, murder, and violence within Canada. He explicitly stated, "I wouldn't have used those words." Carney emphasized progress on these contentious issues, attributing it to the focused resources allocated and the clear stance adopted by the Canadian government. He acknowledged that both the RCMP and Canada's intelligence agencies, CEUS, have reported that Indian government agents have been involved in both murders and extortion activities on Canadian soil. These concerns of transnational repression were directly raised with Prime Minister Modi, although Carney refrained from discussing whether the specific murder of Hardeep Singh, a case the Trudeau government has blamed on Indian agents, was brought up. Turning attention to Australia, correspondent Mackenzie Gray reported from Sydney on how the ongoing conflict is straining relationships among long-standing allies. Many of these countries express serious worries over the consequences of US-led actions against Iran. Recently, President Donald Trump sharply criticized Spain and the United Kingdom for denying the U.S. military permission to use their regional bases. The village of Akrotiri in Cyprus was evacuated following an Iranian drone strike on the nearby British Royal Air Force Base, RAF Akrotiri. This attack was unrelated to any decision by the UK to engage in conflict. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer initially vowed not to involve Britain in the war and stated that American forces would not be allowed to launch attacks on Iran from British bases. However, after the drone strike, Starmer partially relaxed this stance, permitting the U.S. to use 2 British bases exclusively for missions targeting Iranian missile sites. President Trump, however, deemed this concession insufficient and belated. He openly criticized Prime Minister Starmer, remarking, "The UK has been very, very uncooperative. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours." Trump praised German Chancellor Olaf Scholz for providing logistical support, but disparaged the current British leadership, stating, "This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with. He's a tough negotiator." This marks a stark contrast to Trump's warmer tone during his state visit to the UK last year. Meanwhile, Spain, which alongside the UK participated in the disastrous 23 U.S. invasion of Iraq, has also refused us military use of its air bases, with Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez labeling this new war illegal. In response to Spain's refusal, Trump threatened severe economic consequences, stating, "We're going to cut off all trade with Spain. We don't want anything to do with Spain." The trade between the U.S. and Spain is valued at $47 billion. Further tension followed after an Iranian drone attacked a French military base, adding to the volatile situation among Western allies and highlighting the escalating regional conflict. In the United Arab Emirates, French President Emmanuel Macron is following in Starmer's footsteps by dispatching a warship to the region. Although Macron has publicly condemned the war as illegal, he finds himself inevitably drawn into the escalating conflict. Reporting from London, this is Redmond Shannon with Global News. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund is sounding the alarm, warning that a prolonged war with Iran could cast a shadow over the global economy. Today, European markets tumbled sharply, and in North America, the Dow Jones, S&P, and NASDAQ indices also suffered declines as investors moved away from riskier assets. Gabiola now breaks down what this ongoing conflict could mean for everyday consumers and investors. If you're thinking of heading to the gas station, you might want to fill up your tank now, because over the next few weeks, a rise in gas prices is expected. The turmoil in the Middle East and the potential war with Iran spell trouble for your wallet in many ways. We're entering an unprecedented era, arguably far more significant than the Ukraine-Russia crisis. Even though most Canadians source their energy domestically or from the U.S., with very little oil coming from the Middle East, the global nature of oil markets means price increases are inevitable. Planning your budget now to cover higher costs for filling your tank or heating your home makes sense. Economizing by lowering your thermostat a few degrees to an eco-friendly level like 15 or 16 degrees Celsius during the day and raising it when you return home can help ease the strain. But the inflationary effects ripple far beyond just oil and gas prices. When trucking costs rise due to fuel price increases, those costs are passed along in the prices at grocery stores, restaurants, and even for products you might need for your spring DIY projects. Prolonged inflation creates a complex challenge for the central bank, especially with major consequences for variable rate debt instruments like mortgages. A rate hike could be back on the table as early as summer or into the early fall, which would increase costs for those with floating rate mortgages or lines of credit. Moreover, virtually no investment portfolio escapes the impact of these geopolitical tensions. Experts recommend staying the course by continuing monthly contributions to registered retirement savings plans, RES, and tax-free savings accounts. TSS attempting to time the market. Staying informed is wise, but drastic financial maneuvers may be unnecessary for most everyday investors. Reporting from Toronto, this is Donna and Gabiola. Thank you for joining us. In other news, Toronto police are actively investigating an incident that occurred last night at a local synagogue. According to the authorities, gunshots were fired, causing extensive damage to the building, but fortunately, no one was injured. The shooting took place shortly after the congregation concluded a service honoring the Jewish holiday of Purim. Police have increased patrols in the neighborhood to ensure safety. Looking ahead, we will hear from Canadians currently stranded in the Middle East and their hopes that the federal government will provide assistance to bring them home. The Iranian women's soccer team maintained a solemn silence as their national anthem played before the opening match of the Asian Cup held in Australia. Neither the players nor the coaching staff offered any public statements regarding the ongoing war or the recent death of Iran's supreme leader. Notably, they are the only team representing the Middle East that managed to qualify for this prestigious tournament. They had arrived in Australia several days prior to the outbreak of the airstrikes. Amid escalating tensions, Canadian travelers stranded in the Middle East are growing increasingly frustrated, citing what they perceive as insufficient support from the Canadian government. The war has significantly disrupted air travel, closing vast portions of airspace throughout the region. Commercial airlines face major challenges, with many rerouting their flights extensively. Over 12,000 flights destined for Dubai and other prominent international hubs have been canceled since the conflict intensified. In response, some countries have organized special evacuation flights for their citizens. Heidi Petroic reports on the limited avenues available for Canadians seeking to return home safely. There is a sense of relief among some tourists who have managed to land back on home soil after being stranded abroad. For instance, a German evacuation flight operated by Emirates Airline arrived in Frankfurt from Dubai on Tuesday day. Meanwhile, 2 French evacuation flights are scheduled to land in Paris later that same night. The United States is considering using charter planes and military flights to repatriate approximately 1,500 Americans. Despite several airlines such as Emirates and Fly at Dubai continuing operations, the absence of Canadian carriers has left travelers like Evnoga and her husband frustrated. They were originally scheduled to fly home from their vacation in Dubai on Tuesday morning, but now find themselves scrambling for alternatives. They criticize Ottawa for not providing adequate assistance. We keep receiving emails advising us not to rely on the Canadian government for evacuation, but to find commercial flights, Eve explains. However, because commercial options are scant, especially for Canadians, this advice offers little comfort. Flights departing Dubai predominantly belong to Gulf and European airlines, operating only a trickle compared to the thousands canceled following Saturday's strikes on Iran. Omar Khan shared his futile efforts after spending 3 to 4 hours at a ticketing office of Emirates Airline in a mall, trying to secure a flight from Dubai to Ontario. He highlights the lack of substantive guidance from Canadian authorities beyond the general advice to depart whenever possible. They should definitely be doing more, he asserts. Qatar's airspace remains closed over Doha, limiting alternatives even further. Rescue operations in the region face significant challenges. Overland routes might be the only option, though their feasibility remains uncertain. Meanwhile, Slovakia managed a military flight carrying 100 of its citizens from Jordan, a journey covering more than 3,000 kilometers. In contrast, Canadians face a daunting distance exceeding 10,000 kilometers to reach home. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, emphasized that the government's top priority is the safety of the estimated 100,000 Canadians currently in the region. At a recent event in Toronto, she disclosed that she had inquired with Oman regarding potential access to its airspace for evacuation purposes, but provided few further details. "I've requested the use of that airspace if necessary," she said amid ongoing tensions. Amidst the chaos, including fresh airstrikes occurring less than an hour prior to the statement, individuals like Evnoga simply want to escape the escalating crisis gripping the Middle East. This is Heidi Petroik reporting for Global News in Halifax.org. Stay tuned for more updates, including an upcoming look at the goals behind an inquest into BC's mass shooting. The chief coroner has announced an inquest into the tragic shootings that took place in Tumber Ridge, where 8 people lost their lives, including 5 children, before the shooter ended their own life at the town's high school. This inquest is designed to be a transparent and independent platform, carefully examining the events and circumstances that led to this devastating incident. Its goal is to provide clear recommendations to help prevent such shootings in the future. A crucial focus will be on how individuals experiencing crises are identified and supported, particularly concerning access to mental health services in rural, remote, and small communities throughout British Columbia. This includes exploring the availability of crisis intervention and comprehensive wraparound supports. Information about the timing and location of the inquest will be shared once the police have completed their investigation.